shut the power off on themselves. And today, we'll bring you the boomerang effect that is destroying Iran from within, and a severe blow to the Hamas terrorist organization in the Gaza Strip. The Israeli Air Force eliminated the number one figure of Hamas, of the terrorist organization in the Gaza Strip, Azzedine al-Haddad, the head of the military wing of the Hamas terrorist organization. All the details are coming soon. I'm Shoshani. This evening, Yair Pinto is not with us for the week, so you are with me twice a day, getting updates on what is happening. So guys, welcome to Boots on the Ground, the news report that brings you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel, and also the whole truth about what's happening in our neighborhood, the Middle East. Today is May 17th. On the way back from the summit meeting in Beijing, Trump made clear to reporters on the Air Force One that Tehran's latest peace proposal is completely unacceptable to him. And he said sarcastically, "I looked at it, and if I don't like the first sentence, I simply throw it in the trash." Even before his trip, he declared with confidence, either they will reach an agreement or they will be destroyed. U.S. President Donald Trump landed in Washington over the weekend after his visit to China, while escalation in the campaign against Iran is still on the table. And right now, it appears that the United States and Israel are engaged in intensive preparations, the largest since the ceasefire went into effect, for a possible renewal of strikes in Iran as early as next week. Trump's senior advisors have prepared plans for a return to military strikes if he decides to try to break the deadlock through additional bombings. But according to them, he has not yet made a decision regarding the next steps. Senior Pentagon officials and military commanders have said that the United States used the month-long pause in bombings to rearm the warships and attack aircraft in the region. U.S. President Donald Trump published a post on his Truth account in which he wrote, "It was the calm before the storm." In the background of the image, which was designed using artificial intelligence, which is obvious to anyone looking at it, Iranian ships can be seen in the stormy sea, apparently meant to resemble the Strait of Hormuz. On the other side, Iran is making clear that it is prepared for the return of hostilities. The Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, Mohammad Bakir Kalibaf, declared on social media that their forces are ready to deliver, in his words, an appropriate response, and that the whole world already understands this. There will be a surprise, and he claimed that they will destroy the American army. Now guys, look, the plan of the Revolutionary Guards in Iran was perfect on paper: to block the Strait of Hormuz, collapse the global energy market, and impose its conditions. But in May 2026, this move, well, it's coming back at them like a boomerang. We'll bring you all the details in just a few minutes. And what is happening on a military level in the Middle East right now? So we need to not forget that the United States and Israel used the days of the pause with Iran to stock up on weapons and prepare for the possibility of renewing the war in the coming days. More than 50,000 American soldiers, 2 aircraft carriers, dozens of fighter jets, and more than a dozen armed destroyers are on alert throughout the Middle East. The Pentagon has completed its preparations to renew Operation Epic Fury within days, with the operational plans that were formed including extensive bombing sorties against Iranian military infrastructure. In addition to that, the possibility is being examined of a ground operation by special forces against the enriched uranium facilities in Isfahan, or taking control of the oil export of the island of Khalq. Are Israel and the United Arab Emirates soon on their way to fight shoulder to shoulder against the Iranian regime? A report in the Telegraph reveals growing American pressure for a military operation by the United Arab Emirates against Iran, and the strengthening of a cooperation with Israel. It's claimed that officials in the Trump administration are calling for an unusual step. Officials in the Trump administration are calling on the United Arab Emirates to take control of the critical Iranian oil island. Stay with us, guys, and we'll explain everything soon. In addition to the naval blockade in the Strait of Hormuz, behind the scenes yesterday, the United States eliminated the deputy leader of global ISIS, Abu Bilal al-Minqui, a joint operation by United States and Nigeria. Al-Minuki had been hiding in Africa, but was located thanks to intelligence resources. In a statement published on Truth Social, Trump wrote that the operation was carried out under his direction and described it as a complex operation that was carefully and meticulously planned. Now, according to President Trump, tonight at my direction, brave American forces and the armed forces of Nigeria flawlessly, can I say this with his accent? Flawlessly carried out a well-planned and highly complex mission designed to remove from the battlefield the most active terrorist in the world. And over the past weekend in southern Lebanon, in the war against the Hezbollah terrorist organization, the IDF struck more than 440 targets and eliminated more than 220 Hezbollah terrorists. And while the Israeli Air Force is preparing for strikes in Iran, IDF forces continue to operate in southern Lebanon, south of the forward defense line. As part of the activity in the ground forces in a cooperation with the Air Force, weapons depots were struck, where stockpiles of mortar bombs, anti-tank missiles, and a drone launch position were stored. It is important to remember that Israel's negotiations with Lebanon continue, specifically, by the way, the Lebanese government, not the Hezbollah terrorist organization. Now, the opening of direct contacts between Israel and Lebanon in Washington marked an unusual moment in the Lebanese arena. After years in which even talking about peace or normalization with Israel was considered an almost absolute taboo, the discourse in Beirut is beginning to crack. And it seems the public voices calling for a peace agreement can already be heard. And meanwhile, the IDF continues to dismantle the Hamas terrorist organization in Gaza. While the Hamas terrorist organization refuses to disarm as agreed, the IDF and Shin Bet Israeli intelligence carried out the elimination of the new head of the organization, the military head, I need to specify. Izzadin Haddad, one of the architects of the October 7th massacre, was eliminated. The number one figure at Hamas in Gaza was killed yesterday in an Air Force strike in the Rimal neighborhood. His funeral procession began in the Strip. He managed the mechanism of holding the hostages and surrounded himself with them, said the official statement from the IDF and Israeli intelligence. On October 6, 2023, he is the one who gathered his battalion commanders and instructed them to capture as many soldiers as possible and to document it all. The elimination of Izzadin al-Haddad is expected to affect Hamas's command structure in Gaza, its recovery capabilities, and the military dynamic. And today, we will also dive into what's happening in the Gaza Strip. So there's a lot ahead of us. Let's dive into the details. I'm Mati Shoshani. With me is Yair Pinto, and we're boots on the ground, bringing you the whole truth of what's happening in Israel and the war against the Revolutionary Guard in Iran, the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. And one moment before we continue, a good word is due to Noam Bitan, Israel's representative at Eurovision, who brought Israel to second place with the song Michel. If you haven't listened to it, look it up online. It's a great and catchy song. Don't tell my wife I said that. In the middle of a wave of hatred, of boos, of boycotts, and political pressures surrounding Israel's very participation, he went up on stage. He sang. He gave a dignified, a strong, and a proud performance. For us, this is more than a second place. I want to call on you to keep spreading the truth. Share our content with as many people as possible. Click the subscribe button. And most importantly, don't forget to look for me, Mati Shoshani, and Yair Pinto on social media, so you can get a view through our eyes of what it's like to live life in Israel under war. And wait, are we about to return to fighting? I'm only saying that, or only because of the information that's been reaching us on evacuation flights of Russian Air Force that left today from the United Arab Emirates. So a flight like this took place about a week before the opening of Operation Roaring Lion in the past. So this is interesting. And on top of that, as we mentioned in Operation Roaring Lion, we all saw Trump's post in which he himself threatened, "This is the calm before the storm." It seemed that all the evidence points towards a preparation for more fighting. And in my opinion, this is what is going to happen. Let me break it down for you over the next couple minutes. We are in a really, really interesting place right now. And let me break this down for you. Many things have changed. We just have not seen them yet. I'm going to talk about a couple things. I'm going to talk about Trump and China and, of course, President Xi. That's one thing. The second one is the campaign of financial pressure on Iran by the United States and the efficacy of it. And three, about the impact or the ability of the United States to carry out an additional attack on Iranian targets. And four, the big picture, what's really brewing under the surface. Let's start with China. Let's start with the United States meeting with the Chinese government that just took place in Beijing over the weekend. I want to start with the big facts. The big facts is that we don't know everything that happened. But what we do know indicates that the United States and the Chinese seem to be inching closer to each other in an attempt to rebuild the trade agreements and an attempt to rebuild the military cooperation or lack of hostility, might be a better way, and to peel back and pull back on some of the proxy warfare and the financial warfare that they've been carrying out. In simple words, if you had to say what happened there, it would be Trump and President Xi looking at each other in the eye and saying, look, let's be friends. What is the purpose of fighting? What is the purpose of these continued hostilities? Let's find a way to make this work. Let's find a way to make this cooperation work better for both of us. And the loser in this entire equation, believe it or not, is the Iranian Ayatollah regime. Why is that? Let me give you some numbers. Sometimes the numbers really tell the true story about what's happening. One, first thing to remember, for the Iranians, the export of oil to China is an enormous part of their GDP, as in the money that they're making, the money that they're using from selling illicit oil, from sanctioned oil. Most of that money, over 90%, comes from one government and one government only, the Chinese. But the number tells the true story. For the Chinese, the oil they buy from Iran, well, that's just 10%, give or take, of the oil they buy on a daily basis. So 10% can be replaced. 90% is very hard to replace. What else happened there? The Chinese and the Americans want more than just to talk about Iran. They want global trade. They want the removal or the weakening of sanctions. They want, and this is important to say, they want to balance out, as far as the U.S. is considered, the trade deficit with the Chinese. And it doesn't take much to dramatically change the numbers. When you're mixing two such enormous economies, the United States economy, the Chinese economy, it really doesn't take much to bring the two countries together. Just a little less on the tariffs, just a little more on selling chips and processors, etc., and you've already changed the game dramatically. The Chinese need to buy a little more American beef, a little more American corn, soybeans, wheat maybe, some, let's call it agricultural goods, and that takes the agreement between them to a completely different place. And in the background of that, there's a question of Iran. And Iran's an interesting one. For the Chinese, Iran is just yet another country that needs a lot from China and China doesn't depend on. For the Iranians, the Chinese are their biggest and most important financial contributor to their economy. Why? Because they buy their sanctioned oil. We're talking to the tune of $400 to $500 million per day. Let that sink in for a second. $500 million US per day that is being paid by the Chinese to the Iranian regime. You take that away, and boy, we're in a different place as far as the Iranian regime is considered, and we are in a very different place as far as the influence on the Iranian regime is considered. And right now it looks, again, we don't know everything that happened there, that the Chinese are inching towards President Trump, that they're getting closer to him, they're getting closer to his demands, getting closer to what he's asking of them. Now let's talk about what's going to happen in the Middle East. In the Middle East right now, we have a fascinating situation. The Iranians tried to pull a card that would dismantle and disrupt the global trade, that would be blocking the Strait of Hormuz. Instead of that happening, you know what happened? The American regime, the American army, the American armed forces, they pulled an Uno reverse card on the Iranian regime. And when they put that card on the table, they reimposed the sanctions on the Iranians in the same way they were trying to do to others. The only entity that's really losing any substantial money every day now is the Iranian Ayatollah regime. The U.S. isn't losing money. The Emiratis, the Saudis, they have pipes that move part of the oil at least, so their losses are reduced. The Iranians are losing a substantial amount of money every single day. And one way or another, one day or another, they will run out of cash, and they will run out of place to store oil, and they will be, well, in a very uncomfortable place, between a Trump and a hard place, to botch that statement, in which they really need to come to the negotiation table. What does this actually mean? One, it means that the Chinese probably won't intervene and won't interfere with the conflict that's taking place with China. Secondly, that the U.S. has far more wiggle room, far more playing room now to deal with what is happening on the ground in the Strait of Hormuz. And they have the ability to do exactly that. They have an enormous buildup of military power, an enormous buildup of military personnel in this region that is able to carry out some severe attacks against the Iranian regime that will further cripple that regime. What could it look like? Taking over Khalg Island, taking over another oil island, knocking out some of their oil tankers, knocking out some of their oil pipelines, or using some special forces to extract oil from under the nose of the Iranian regime and take it, making a symbolic statement in which they sell Iranian oil and benefit from that cash themselves. But wait, it can get even better than this. On the table is also the question of the nuclear capability. And I know this sounds outlandish, honestly, and I too at first thought this was unreasonable, but it is feasible and it is possible for the American special forces that are stationed in this region to go into Iran, to isolate an area, and to extract part, not all, part of the enriched uranium that the Iranian regime has squirreled away deep in the ground, or whatever the Middle Eastern version of squirreling away things is, since squirrels are not very indigenous in the deserts of Iran or Israel, as a matter of fact. But getting back to that story, I feel like we've turned a page. One, we're still fighting a war on multiple fronts as an Israeli country. The United States is still strong and still present in the Middle East, facing Iran. But where we could go, and this is such a real possibility that I think we might be missing it, we might be at a place where the Iranians lose some of the backing of the Chinese. They lose some of the financial support of the Chinese, and they are forced to negotiate now with the U.S. that is far less lenient, far less patient, far less forgiving of the mistakes that they will make. And if they need to, well, I think Trump has proven at this point that he is willing and able to take military action against the enemies of the United States and global freedom, and that Israel is willing to cooperate with that and fight against the Iranian regime. One way or another, things haven't dramatically changed on the surface, but under the surface, the current is clear in favor of the United States, in favor of Israel, and down with the Ayatollah regime in Iran. It might take days, weeks, possibly even months, but that is the direction we're going in. It's just a question of how it will happen and what exactly will happen. And that, in my book, well, that's good news. The ceasefire has paused recent violence. However, a spiritual battle is still taking place. And today, nearly 99% of Israelis don't know Jesus, Yeshua. Think about that. Nearly 99% of Israelis don't know Jesus. But a miracle is unfolding. One for Israel Ministry is sharing the gospel, and Jewish people are accepting Jesus in numbers not seen since the early church. Many Arabs are also finding faith and unity. One for Israel is an initiative of native-born Israelis, good personal friends of ours, sharing the gospel, discipling believers, and equipping spiritual leaders across Israel. As Romans 10:1 expresses, my heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel is that they may be saved. Your support helps bring the gospel back to Israel. And I want you to do something for me right now. Pick up the phone and call 800-879-5530. That's 800-879-5530 to help share the gospel in Israel. Visit oneforisrael.org/pray or scan the QR code on your screen. Thank you, and let's start. In southern Lebanon overnight, Hezbollah fired rockets and explosive drones towards IDF forces operating on the ground. The Israeli Air Force intercepted several rockets. A suspicious aerial target fell near the Misgav Am area, and the IDF says there were no casualties among our forces. But this incident does not stand alone. It comes exactly as the big question returns to the table. Is the ceasefire with Iran about to break in the coming days? Because, well, while Hezbollah is trying to hurt the forces in southern Lebanon, Washington and Jerusalem are preparing for a much wider possibility. Not another isolated incident, not another verbal warning, but a possible return to direct war against Iran and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. United States President Donald Trump returned from his trip to China, and his message to Tehran was very clear. The latest Iranian proposal was not accepted. Trump said that if he does not like the first sentence of a proposal, he simply throws it in the trash. And in another post with Iranian ships in the stormy sea, he wrote the sentence that the entire Middle East read twice. This was the calm before the storm. The question now is not only what Trump is saying, the question is what the American military has already prepared. Now, there are more than 50,000 American troops in the Middle East, 2 aircraft carriers, more than a dozen destroyers, and a dozen fighter jet squadrons. The Pentagon used this month of pause to rearm the ships, to refill the stockpiles, and to bring the attack aircraft back to a condition where they can take off almost immediately without any malfunctions. Now, there are several options on the table. The first is more intensive bombing sorties against military infrastructure in Iran. The second is continuing the naval blockade around the Strait of Hormuz. The third option, the most dangerous one, is a limited ground operation by special forces against nuclear material or facilities buried deep underground in the Isfahan area or around Iran's oil export hubs. The American military system understands the risk very well. A grand operation like this is not the same as an airstrike. It requires entry, security, real-time intelligence, extraction, and thousands of soldiers to support the broader operation. That's why even those preparing this option know how to say it clearly. It could come with a heavy price. But Iran is not sitting quietly either. In Tehran, officials are declaring that the armed forces are ready for any aggression. Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Kalibaf warned that the United States and Israel, well, they'll be surprised. This is the regime's regular language. A lot of confidence on the outside and a lot of fear on the inside. Because behind the threats, Iran is under unusual pressure. Its air defense system was badly damaged. Its detection capabilities were damaged. Its naval capabilities will take years to rebuild. And in the mission field, the numbers are confusing, but Israel is looking only at what can reach here. And in that category, Iran still has more than 1,000 missiles and more than 200 launchers. That's why Israel cannot allow itself to fall asleep. Even if there is currently no production of new ballistic missiles in Iran, there is certainly production of UAVs. Even if some of the sites were hit, Iran managed to restore access to most of its missile sites. And even if the regime talks about an agreement, it still wants to keep the uranium, the launchers, the UAVs, and its proxies in Lebanon, Gaza, Iraq, and Yemen. This is where Trump's dilemma begins. On the one hand, a short military blow or two will cause a lot of damage. But on the other hand, no intelligence official can point with certainty to one target whose destruction would immediately force the Iranian regime to bend. That's why the option of continuing the naval blockade remains on the table. And it may be the quietest weapon, but also the most painful one altogether. This is where the boomerang effect really begins. The Revolutionary Guards wanted to turn the Strait of Hormuz into a pressure tool against the world. They wanted to threaten a route through which a huge part of the world's oil and gas passes. They wanted to make Washington, Jerusalem, Abu Dhabi, Riyadh, and Beijing think twice before they ever move. But now, well, the blockade around Hormuz is beginning to choke Iran itself. More than 90% of Iran's annual trade passes through the strait. If exports are stuck, the money doesn't come in. If the money doesn't come in, it's hard to rebuild infrastructure. And if the infrastructure can't be rebuilt, it is hard to pay the Revolutionary Guards, the Basij, and every Hamas, the Hezbollah, and every other arm of the Iranian axis. Inflation in Iran, which was already high before the war, is soaring. There is talk of